On the podcast today, we are going to speak about reclaiming your attention in a distracted world, which is a massive problem in the modern world, especially due to technology. And if you're sincerely interested in Eastern spirituality, then within Eastern spirituality, there are meditation techniques and practices that are designed to hold your attention for long, very long periods of time. And so this is why a lot of people in the modern day have a lot of problem meditating, is due to their attention being scattered all over the place due to technology and the world that we are living in. This highly distracted and highly stimulative world that we are living in right now.
Yeah, we are trained to be distracted constantly instead of training to be have this focused attention, right? Unfortunately, we become so insensitive, being distracted all the time. So, which makes everyone to focus on something for a long period of time. Like you said, meditation. Some people find it very difficult to meditate. They can't even sit still for 1 minute, 2 minutes. They find it very difficult. That's because, again, we are living in this attention-based economy right now, so that we are very vulnerable to this having the focused attention. Our attention is always going out, never going inward.
What I find a lot, especially because you and I, a lot of the time are highly critical of social media and things like this, is that a lot of people tend to defend social media and technology without actually realizing the damage that's actually occurring to them as well. And so, as you were saying, like social media especially are in the attention economy game. So they're about fragmenting your attention for profit, about keeping you engaged in a platform for profit, where Eastern spirituality is about enhancing your attention and your awareness to benefit yourself long term. So you're not blown here or there by the rising tides of the world. You have extreme calm and equanimity in mind. And obviously social media doesn't cultivate calm and equanimity. It cultivates agitation, anxiety, stress, and depression in a lot of cases. And so I do find it strange when people will write to us and say, they'll defend social media and this and that, and they'll say, oh, but I found your channel because of this. And look, we're not saying that it's totally negative. There are positive things, but the way it's being used is completely wrong, and people are a victim to the algorithm. So, it has to be spoken about, because the future of especially humanity through the kids is very bleak, because they're being trained, our children are being trained to have short attention spans, where when you and I were younger, we would sit, like say if we're at our grandparents' place, right? Like I used to hate going to my grandparents' place because the adults would just talk and I'd be sitting there like rather jibber-jabbing. But unknowingly, I'm training to be more patient and having perseverance and instead of like trying to agitate my mind constantly all the time. Whereas now, like a kid, if the adults were talking with their grandma and so forth and so on, they can just jump on the phone and just watch SpongeBob SquarePants or something, or play some stupid games, right? Like, so you're training them to be constantly active and distracted without giving them a sense of boredom and this and that at a young age.
Yeah, these services are available to everybody for free, right? But because of that, we are also losing sense of critical thinking, I think. Yep. It's too available, and it's for free. Anyone can be on it, right? Course, as long as you want, and whichever platform you want to be on, you can absolutely have the complete freedom in that world. Again, but then what's the trade-off is that we just keep giving our attention away, and that decreases our critical thinking, critical way to use these services, right? And when you have a little bit of doubt in these services, it's pretty easy to work it out. It's provided for free, but what they buy off that is your attention. That's why we call it attention economy. Your attention, your two eyes looking in the screen, that is product. Your focus is product, so you are sold basically, right? So it's not hard to work it out. So that you've been sold, so that when you defend these services, you got to really ask yourself what you're really doing, right? You are defending these attention-based economy. Your attention being product and being sold completely is something that you're for it, and you are teaching the same thing to your children. No.
And the social media, the big tech companies aren't neutral, right? Like, this is what people, they think that they're neutral. They're like their public utilities. They're not. They're not neutral. So, like, they're selling, you are the product.
Yes.
And they themselves have their own agendas. So whatever they, we find this especially in Silicon Valley, right? So unfortunately, Silicon Valley is not all of the tech companies coming out of there are not neutral. And so they usually side with, the liberal academia. They side with that they are completely against, like, conservative voices, and obviously Hindus. They hate Hindus. And so what happens then is that if someone who's clever at understanding the algorithm sees that, okay, for example, they actively close down Hindu channels, right? So if someone is clever at seeing that, then they will make maybe an anti-Hindu channel, which then the algorithm will push because it aligns with their own personal beliefs within Silicon Valley, which ironically sides with George Soros's beliefs and so forth and so on, his hatred for Hinduism. And so you have that, right? So then it becomes very covert then. It becomes very seedy, right? Like, so people then are creating content unknowingly to suit what the algorithm promotes. Yes. And so as we see with the social media companies, as I said, they side with liberal academia. They side with this sense of lack of common sense that has become woke ideology, and so they try to silence conservative voices. So they're not really neutral, and they're not inclusive. They don't include everyone's stance. And then that is promoted on the rest of the world, right? So you have this thing in America where you have, like, liberals versus conservatives, when then they think that that's for everyone in the world. And it's like, that's America. Why do you assume that that's happening, that that's for India? Like, why are you superimposing your own personal agendas and beliefs on other countries that are completely isolated and separate from liberal academia in America, right? And so that's a very dangerous game that you're getting into. So then you have, as I said, people who are trying to get your attention are promoting certain information,
yes,
and that keeps you hooked on that. And it also then trains you to believe some of that information, yes, which is very dangerous, right? Because it's not a neutral service. You are being played. Yeah, and we've spoken about that many times on the podcast before. You are being played, man, big time.
Your attention being a product, and
yes,
that's what these companies want, yes, right? And this is what they're thinking. If you are running that sort of company, or how can we hold people's attention as long as possible? The content of in what's on the social media has to be much more stimulated, much more controversial, lots of dramas, lots of troubles.
Yeah, the most ridiculous content, yes, you can think of. Yeah,
that has to be on social media to keep our attention, right? It's one put together,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, 5-year-old can work it out.
Yeah, it's not rocket science.
No.
So that whatever it's on the social media usually is to hijack your attention. So usually unhealthy. They use that negative biased our brain, right? We tend to be more attractive to looking at negative things. That's why we always see the bad news. On the news, when do we ever get to see the first report of the news is some sort of charity work or some good things? That never happens, right? So, yeah, so that's why the content being always like a negative bias, always that will, as you said, will eventually control our way of thinking, and then they got us.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's actually the world that we're living in right now,
100%,
right?
yeah. Well, see, you and I, because we were, we're usually, isolated from the world. And so we usually live in our own little world away from society. But we didn't, because we live like that, we didn't know how, manipulative the big tech companies were until about 2018 when I had I had a question to YouTube about a certain video about Shiva that I had, and because I didn't like this video, right? So, and then they openly said to me, "We don't support Hinduism," and I was like, "That's a pretty strange comment to say, right? Like, you don't support it, because as a public utility, to have real inclusiveness, you support everything. I mean, within reason, obviously. If someone's spouting off violence and espousing certain things like that, then that should be obviously shut down. You don't want to incite violence or,
Yeah.
But we're just talking about the Dharma, and that is a problem with them. And I didn't understand at the time. I thought, well, I wonder why they would hate Hinduism. And then I was, I see. So they side with a certain political narrative in America which doesn't accept the way India is, because India is mainly Hindu. And so it is a Hindu nation. I mean, there's nothing that you can say about it. And they have their own way of doing things. And they should be allowed to do things their way without having someone else come in and say, oh, that's not how it should be done, and we're going to change it. And they are trying to change it through social media, which is why probably platforms like Twitter and that will probably end up being banned in India for good reason. And so you have that whole dichotomy, right? So you have that whole spectrum of, and we didn't know about that, and we thought, well, that's a bit strange that they openly said they don't support. And okay, but it's not going to stop me from making content on Vedanta and yoga. That's my bread and butter. So,
I mean, it's definitely strange, very strange comment as a huge company, the billion-dollar company is coming out and make a statement like that, because Hinduism itself is a culture.
Yeah, of course.
How do you not? How do you support certain culture only as such an influential corporation to the world?
Well, they've obviously made a stand because they side with the lack of common sense within liberal academia, and this whole new way of these mind pathogens, as Gardside talks. They are mind pathogens too, where they side with only some cultures, and they side with only some religions, and they side with only some races. So it's exclusive. It's an exclusive platform. It's not inclusive.
Yes.
And so that's unfortunately training other people to be like that. And so and so the louder you are, the more attention that they will get.
Yeah.
The more ridiculous you are, the more attention you will get. The more stupid you are, the more attention you will get. So then you have those sorts of ways of thinking of exclusivity that the tech companies promote. If you fall in line with those, then they will garner the most attention, because first of all, there's probably some people out there who have fallen victim to these mind pathogens and have become, are starting to lose their mind a little. And then there's also those who oppose them that want to see what's being said. So then obviously you've got two camps all going there, right? We don't really get this with our channel, obviously, with my channel, because Eastern spirituality is its own sort of niche, but unfortunately, but that's the sort of the way it is, right? So
it's so sad that these content of online world has to be stimulated, very controversial, and dramas and things like that has to be. That's how they get the people's attention. So I find this, as time goes on, level of hate is just rapidly going up. And I think I've seen this kind of graph. I think maybe someone like Jonathan Haidt's work or something like that. Someone on a podcast trying to showing this graph saying how the level of hate, general public hatred level is going up since like 80s. Again, the growth is very small, 80s, 90s, but then since 2000 it's going like this way. It's just almost like 90 degrees. So that is to show that social media at the start didn't intend this to happen, right? But what we have today, yes, but what we have today is social media is very unsocial.
Yeah.
Social media ever dividing people in the society, separating people between gender, race, all this kind of thing, different culture.
It's divisive.
Yeah, it's very divisive and not teaching to accept one another and tolerate one another and just try to understand one another, things like that. It's only boosting to hate each other, right? Yeah. So that just lack of compassion, lack of understanding, all these things happening. And I think it unfortunately becoming kind of social norm. Yeah. And I think which is very sad and also dangerous too, right?
So you become a puppet of social media. That's why I said you're being played.
Yes.
See, that's the thing. When you don't have a strong attention, you don't even know you're being played.
Right.
And you become a puppet. And they are inciting violence. They are inciting division amongst people, and it's all based on nonsense too. It's all based on what sells ads for them. That's what it's but that's what it's based on.
Yeah.
So the most controversial, the most loud will be promoted. They're not promoting peace, harmony, and equanimity for all people. They've created a game that's dividing us, and those with the smallest attention spans are falling victim to this, right? So all that can happen from that is that, as you said, anger and everything increases. You see it, especially from 2010 when you had apps and that start being implemented on smartphones. Well, when smartphones only just came around sort of that time, you see an exponential growth with anger and hatred just in the community in general. Yes. So, and this is what happens when your attention is fragmented, because you can't think clearly. You're taking all of these sound bites in, all of these little teaspoonfuls of information, and then it really messes with your psychology. So then you start hating certain people for no reason at all, really, and you start having opinions about other certain people. You lack then empathy and compassion. You can't forgive others. You're really being trained to be a really hostile individual, you know. And so that's what's really frightening, I think, for a lot of people, particularly in America, because that's where it's kind of rife in America, where people are being trained to sort of have small attention spans and trained to be angry and aggressive with and actually it's thought of to be good to be like that now these days. Like, yes, you need to make a stand. You have to slam your feet on the floor and let your voice be known. And
yes.
And you know, most people don't really vibe with that in general. Like that usually only captures the attention of a really small, very small minority of people. But nevertheless, it does capture the attention of some people.
Yes.
So, and that's what's really frightening about it, because, you know, you're taking these little teaspoons in, you're training your mind to be a certain way, but you're not really like that. So you become a product then of what you are consuming. And so that's really frightening, right? So.
Yeah, so I think that if you were to choose to walk on the spiritual path, is kind of going to build this shield from constant distractive outside world, I think.
Yes.
And the funny thing is that, as you mentioned earlier, when we were younger, when we were kids, we had to sit down with grandmas and grandpas, and when family gathering happens and you are there, and there's that I don't know if you ever felt it. There's like a strange uncomfortability when you just sit with your grandma or grandpa only, between you and them. Feels. Because there's obviously generational gap as well. There's not much common thing to talk about or do things together. No. But like they've been a part of our generation. You know? Like you should sit down with them and just help them. I don't know, doing farming work or just doing simple housework or just to take a dog going for a walk together and simple things. And from doing so, we had to be resilient, not to be distracted in our own mind as a child, right? So somewhat we didn't even need these kind of meditation or focus attention training per se, let's say, because in our generation that was very organic and natural, right? Yeah. We didn't have computer easily available and things like that. There was no internet and things like that, right? But now I think that's why walking on the spiritual path now has ever been actually more important for all of us, and especially younger generation. I think it teaches you to sit and meditate without noise, maybe just light and incense and just focus on breath and things like that. So it can only give you that shield from that attack from outside.
Yeah, because you know how to hold your awareness, your attention. So you have resilience.
Yes.
In this soup of distraction. You know,
and
to elaborate a bit on what you said, like my first computer was when I was 22, and actually it wasn't my computer. Actually, it was my friends that I was living with in Melbourne.
So the first computer that you get to use.
Yeah, it was 22. Yeah, you know, so that's. I mean, we're dating ourselves a bit there, but even when you mention your grandparents, you know, the great thing is about when the environment is much more organic like that, much more natural without all of these distracted devices. Is even though there is that generational gap, you learn immense things from your grandparents because they have a lot of lessons to teach you. They do it unknowingly because they are from a time that's a bit distant from where you are as a child. So, and you learn a lot. And actually, after time, that uncomfortability sort of goes away because you get to know grandpa and grandma, and you know life is good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So. And you know, a lot of people don't have that. You know, you can have people now sitting in one room who are family, and they're all on their phones. They don't even communicate. And if they do communicate, they communicate about things that is on the screen.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the most frustrating things you and I come across because when we meet friends, we don't have a smartphone. So, and if we're sitting with them, they might start fidgeting and playing with their smartphone. And I have a chapter in my next book coming out, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, and the subchapter is actually called Stop Fidgeting, You're an Adult. You know, because you are an adult. So why are you sitting there fidgeting with your phone? Because when we were children, you might get a smack for fidgeting all the time with your toys or you know, being a nuisance. But now it's like, it's supported. Yeah, man, what are you doing? Don't sit there calm. Grab your phone out and start playing around. It's like, no, I'm good because I don't have a phone, first of all. And I don't need my attention to be pulled here and there, especially by rubbish on social media.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand, how it got to that stage where it becomes normal.
Yeah.
Like, be on the phone. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? I don't understand how far we came to. Yeah.
And, you know, you and I have experienced this personally because we've taken people on tours and meditation retreats and this and that. And we've been in a beautiful place like Tiruvannamalai, for example. And we're going to Ramana Ashram and we're walking Arunachala. And these are the highlight of people's lives. But they're more focused then on getting photos in the right place, on getting the likes and the retweets and this and that on their social media account, than rather being there in the experience. And Alan Watts mentioned this way back when he went to Japan, and he thought it was strange because when he went to Kyoto, and Kyoto is a very beautiful place for those who haven't been, and the Zen temples there, and so Alan was embracing the experience because he knows that, you know, this is once in a lifetime, especially back then. You go to Japan, you don't go there ever again, right? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. But then he looked around and people were busy documenting the experience with their... And they only had cameras back then. God forbid Alan saw what's going on now. But so then he was saying, like, it's interesting, right? They were distracted trying to document the experience rather than actually embracing the actual experience that they're having. And this documenting the experience is also what contributes to this pervading anxiety that we have in society, this restlessness, right? Like, so you have this terminology now, as you know, like it's very Instagram friendly, or this is an Instagram spot, or and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, and so it's all about then documenting the experience, getting the photo in the right spot, and this and that. So you have this then you have this thing in the mind, right, that you're constantly thinking about, what's the next post I can put up on social media that's going to garner the most attention, and so forth and so on. And so you have this constant restlessness, and you'll notice this, like, for example, you might go somewhere and you might be at a restaurant or an airport or something like this, and you can see the restlessness where people, like, they can't stop looking at their phone, or you'll see their foot shaking or their hand tapping on the table. That is like a restlessness that's become almost unconscious because of you can tell a lot from people who do that. Like their feet are shaking at the table, they're tapping the table, or they're constantly always pulling out their phone, this and that. It's a reflection of where they are in their mind. Their mind is agitated, and also that's a reflection of how small their attention spans are. And so what happens when you start to incorporate traditional meditation into your life is you start to then have longer attention spans, ability to focus on things for longer periods of time. I get a question a lot, as you know, for the last, especially 5-6 years, how do you write consistently? And it's like, well, I don't have all of these certain things that you have. And I also ask them the question, would you get rid of those things? No, well, but then the excuses come out. I can't. I need it for this. I need it for that. And it's like, but you don't really. Like, you're not Elon Musk. You're not like super famous. So you don't really need these apps on your phone. You don't need to keep up with the Joneses. You can refrain from that, because seriously, if writing is what you seriously want, you have to put the steps in place, the measures in place to achieve those ends. That's all I do. As you know, with me, like I go psycho when it's time to write a book. Things shut down, that's it. Nothing's on, and this and that. I have a certain time of the day to check certain things, but that's it.
What I find it funny with a lot of people nowadays is that they like to undermine reading a book and having a long period of time of attention doing something. They undermine that skill. It shouldn't be a skill, but now it became a skill.
It's a skill, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That ability that you can focus on something for a long period of time. Can you sit for 40 minutes meditating, watching your breath? Can you do it really?
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah,
sincerely.
if you can, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Like, have you ever experienced what that does to you, or what it gives it to you, that 40 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Like,
but they undermine that. So became very rare commodity. But then when it comes to, creative work and art, as you mentioned, your writing, for example, and people come and ask you all the time, how do you write that many books? How can you sit down and write? And you also write the handwriting. You actually, the old school writing, you don't do the keyboard thing.
No.
Like
only I can decipher that writing, as you know.
Yeah.
Handwriting's pretty terrible.
Yeah. No chance for me to, you give me something heavy, I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they like to undermine this. But it's a rare skill. So in the end of the day, if anyone wants to create something for yourself or do something, or you need to discipline yourself to be able to concentrate on one thing for a long period of time.
100%.
First of all, just let's ask yourself that, like, when have you ever read a book from the front cover to the last cover, like from page by page, instead of just browsing through, looking at the content. Oh, I think that's interesting. 105. Look, I just flip over and read a bit, and then that's it. Like, you know.
Like how these entrepreneurs do, and then they say they've read 200 books a year, and they just read the table of contents.
Well, yes, and they already made up their own mind what this book is about, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so improving this skill, being able to having a long period of time focus attention in one thing is a rare thing nowadays, so that it can only benefit you and it can only become more competitive. I mean, it can only be good for you, benefit you, so that if you want to actually go ahead, and if you want to win the competition, let's say, actually that is the way. If you want to become successful, that is the way, actually. Old school always works.
Always works.
Old school way always works. Never fail. Never fail. So why don't you choose to go that way?
Yep. I have another, speaking of a new book next year, I have another subchapter on it, Become a Classic. You know, like people like to look at classic cars and this and that. Like, as you said, old school always works. And you know, unfortunately, that type of sustained attention is going to be a rare commodity in the future. So if you have it, as you said, you will be successful because you'll be the one that's creating the content for people to consume. Whereas other people are all out there with their attention fragmented, they can't focus on something for 5 minutes. So there's nothing, you can't create then lasting pieces of art.
Yes.
You can only create, you know, you can write a social media post, and that's all. That's the level of your attention span. So good luck being able to fill in the time of a podcast or write books or create a movie or a documentary. These are pie in the sky ideas for someone like that. So again, if you start meditating and sincerely stick to the practice, that'll contribute to many things in your life. It'll enhance your intellectual capabilities, which has been proven. It'll enhance your attention, what we are talking about today, and
cognitive functions.
Cognitive functions, and it'll allow you to think clearly without being distracted and being manipulated by big tech companies. You'll be able to see right through it, and that's what frightens those sorts of big tech companies, and what frightens society in general is when someone can see through the illusion and are comfortable and calm and equanimous in their pure state of mind. So, and that's really going to be the rare commodity in the future.
Yes.
And so it's essentially important to stick to your meditation practice, to cultivate calm and holding your attention for long periods of time. And it's important, and this is kind of a plea to everyone who's listening and watching, that you need to start engaging yourself in more long forms of content. So as you mentioned, reading, listening to a podcast, but not listening to a podcast and then checking what's on Facebook at the same time. Listening, and we're really losing the art of listening, which is we can't even listen to each other in conversations because of our attention span, right? You're saying something to me, I've already thinking about something, or I've already drifted off.
Yes, right.
I've already started to daydream, and then I don't even know what you actually said. And people do this all the time, right? And because their attention is fragmented. So you're speaking to me about something complex, and I'm just like, I don't really know what she's talking about. And I start thinking about that hamburger I'm going to get this afternoon, and I'm just nodding and giving you a smile and pretending I know what you're talking about, instead of actually listening, really listening, the art of listening, right? Which is important in spirituality, the art of listening, because that again cultivates attention.
Yes.
It cultivates patience.
Yes.
It cultivates inquiry.
Yeah.
If I don't understand what you're saying, can you explain that a bit more for me? Because I'm sorry, my IQ is not as high as yours. You know, can you explain it in layman's terms for me? You know, so, and that's what meditation can do when we start to hold our attention for long periods of time. And once we start to reorient our life towards longer forms of content as opposed to more short forms of content. And so, and if you look, and you will engage with short forms of content for sure, that's going to happen. We would recommend that you try and avoid that as much as possible. But if you're going to go with short forms of content, make sure you're not always flip-flopping between different subject categories. That's where you start to create more of this fragmented mind, because you're kind of consuming too much different information.
Yes.
So you watch something on politics, and then you watch something on Eastern spirituality, then you watch something on how to fix a car. And people do this every day. They flip-flop because it pops up in their feed.
It just listening to you saying that makes me anxious, actually. It's too much.
Too much, yeah.
Too much.
Well, you're a good example, because you don't have any social. You don't have social media. I mean, you have Facebook, but it's not. It's just like, I don't know what that is. Like a trophy Facebook page, but but it's you don't have like a presence. Like if you went on this podcast, people wouldn't even know that you existed. So, and that's a beautiful thing too, right? Like, and it's a freeing thing for yourself, as you know. Like you've got other things. You're too busy to have social media anyway. So,
I think for me is that having focused attention for a long period of time is always my priority, wherever and whenever it is. Like if I were to walk from A to B, I just walk.
Yeah,
I stopped carrying the music with me anymore. iPod, the
You still have
old
iPad,
school
yeah.
iPod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No Bluetooth.
No Bluetooth. Our phone's too old.
Steer clear of that.
Yeah, so I don't even carry the music with me anymore. And music is, I kind of allocate time for music only. I do that now. I've been doing that for a long time now too. And yeah, when I get to walk, I just walk, do like walking meditation. It's actually beautiful. Like when you walk, you pay attention things, even like looking at the sky and today's full moon, and today's a bit more cloudy, and sun's up. It's beautiful when sunrise. The first sunlight you get to have of the day. It's beautiful. You could enjoy the moment, And yeah, when you walk, you walk. When you get on the public transport, you just sit down, deeply being in the present moment. Fully sit and just observe your breath, look around, and you aware of where you are. These sort of things, because that is my priority. Because if I don't try, I watched that video the other day. That was pretty cool. Or I want to cook this food. I want to eat that. This thoughts comes up in my mind and just kind of already that left me. Like, and you don't even know. You missed the stop. Damn. Like, So you're daydreaming. You are not awake. I try to be awake all the time. That's been my kind of priority for a long time.
Yeah. We notice all the time, and it has increased over the years, obviously, people walking around with headphones on and listening to things and music, and maybe they're listening to us right now. But I talk about this in Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, is that we're not digital, we're analog as human beings. And so you don't want to continually fragment your mind, because it's going to, I know that people don't think that it's going to, but it is contributing to a fragmented mind and a lack of attention.
Yes.
So when you are walking, there's so many other things going on. Your eyes are moving laterally because you're scanning the environment. There's other things in the environment that your body is aware of. It's a multifaceted reality. Yes. Then if you add in sound coming from a silly device, then you're adding another dynamic to it, which is causing your sympathetic nervous system to be on fire. You are overly activated, even though you're walking in the bush, and you think this is great. Sorry.
No, I mean, you're already multitasking. Even in the woods, you're walking in the forest, you're multitasking.
Multitasking, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's fragmenting your attention. That's reducing your attention span. And though, yeah, for sure, if you're listening to a podcast in nature, you could say, okay, that's long form content, and it's better than one song after another. Okay, yeah, but we are splitting hairs a little bit. You're still adding another dynamic in. And so particularly when we walk around the city here and I see people with the headphones on and doing their thing, I constantly think to myself that their attention is distracted, their awareness is distracted, and I know that that's becoming the norm.
Yes.
As we mentioned earlier about children, it's going to become the norm for children to have a distracted focus. And what the world looks like when they become adults, who knows? But it'll all be, I guess, a soundbite generation. And we have platforms now that are 60 seconds less, right? Like, which is terrible. It'll end up being 30 seconds less and go on down the rabbit hole as far as you want to go, right? So that's why, you know, when you're going, like you said, when you're going out for a walk or you're casually just going for a stroll, don't have anything on.
Yes.
And just allow, even if you're in a city, allow the sounds and the smell of the city to enter your being, to, you know, to experience that reality, which has a calming effect on your mind, you know. It's, and you know, like as I mentioned with lateral eye movement, like that's already meditative in itself. Yes. Because it relaxes, there's actually science to this, it relaxes the mind when you walk. That's why when people get stressed, they go for long walks, right? Like, and that's because of the lateral eye movement. But if you add on top of that, you add sounds and this, then you add the thinking mind in there, and your prefrontal cortex is focusing on what Joe Rogan's got to say, but then there's a dog barking at you and you don't know who to focus on, the dog or Joe's about to drop a dime bomb, you know, but you don't know what's going on.
Yes. The reason why walking in nature is so therapeutic is, as you mentioned about the science behind the lateral eye movement, is when we move our eyeballs around, looking at that, looking at this, when we move your eyeball around, what happens in your brain is that your neuron plasticity becomes softened. So it opens to connect with the different network in your brain, and you enhances with the sounds of beautiful nature and the nice sunshine. So you feel with your skin and all these things. So all that absorbed into your brain. So it opens up in your neural network. So that's why you feel more relaxed, more calm, peaceful. It has such the therapeutic effect to everybody, right? So there is a science proven that fact, so that we need to embrace where we came from. We need to learn from nature, go back to nature, and live ourselves fully in nature. So just watch what happens. Yeah. It's very simple.
The perfect technology is human. It's not a smartphone. This is the perfect technology. It's the perfect technology. We don't know anything about it. It's like what Sadhguru said, right? Like, the reason why you think stress is part of the world is because you just don't know anything about this instrument. You don't know how to operate this thing. You don't know how to operate it. You're like, you're blind driving. You don't know how to operate this thing. And as you mentioned with lateral eye movement, like, and the ancients say you understood about this thing, about how the human technology is perfect, because they didn't need neuroscience to confirm about lateral eye movement. That's why you have in Qigong and you have in pranayama, you have lateral eye movement techniques. I remember being at Skanda Ashram in Tiruvannamalai, and there used to be a guy there every morning, foreign guy, I think he was from Scandinavia, and he'd always be doing pranayama. So with every time you breathe in through the right nostril, you look to the right like this, close it, and you breathe out, and you look, and you breathe in, your left. So, but you're always changing your lateral eye movement with each nostril.
Yes.
And so some people like who are fresh to pranayama and Hinduism in general would always say to me, like, well, what's that guy doing? Is he just tripping, or like what's he doing up there? And it's like, no, he's not doing it for fun, like, or for show. It's an actual practice that's been around for thousands and thousands of years that actually has a significant calming effect. And he would always do it before he would go into Skanda Ashram.
Yes.
So he would try to calm right down, bring his mind back to equanimity, and then he'd go in for even deeper forms of meditation. Right?
Yes.
So into Skanda Ashram.
Yes.
And that's this amazing thing that we all have, but that we don't understand anything about it.
Yes.
Because we understand more about what's happening on the smartphone. We understand more about what's happening on Netflix. But you don't understand about how pranayama can calm your mind, or how qigong can open your meridians and calm your mind, and everything like this. We're not talking about this.
it's just amazing how the Eastern ancient tradition has they have it all. I think
They have it all, yeah.
like breath exercise and eye movement, and also the using geisha bowl technique in Taoism. They got it all, you know. And
every subtle practice, right?
Yeah, the ancestors, they had it. Like they figured it out. Really.
They did. And it's really important for us to embrace that. So all of those sorts of meditation practices, or whatever suits your aptitude, but because, and as I said, this is kind of a plea to people who are sincere about Eastern spirituality, because we're going to need people in the future who can hold their attention, who can empathize with other people, who can be compassionate towards other people. Because what's been proven by science is that once our attention spans begin to be reduced, we lack a sense of community. We lack a sense of empathy with others, because we're living in this world. And this world is not real. It's entertaining, but you don't go to the cinema, watch a movie and say, I live in that world. You just watch the movie and you walk out the cinema. And it's either a terrible or a good movie.
Yeah.
That's it. But we are constantly living in the social media world, or the digital world. And so then our world is isolated, which then, and we're riddled with all misinformation and stupidity from that sort of landscape. And then we lack empathy for others. We lack compassion for others. We can't listen to each other. Yeah. We lack a sense of community.
Yes.
And this is dangerous. This is very, very dangerous. And this is why Guyang and I really wanted to do this podcast today, because of the importance of holding your attention for long periods of time. And that is going to be the rare commodity in the future, unfortunately, particularly with how the world, unless, and look, and I'm fairly sure that this may happen, certain social media platforms disappear. And I think that some will disappear in time due to, you know, their behaviors and
influence they want to.
Yeah. And, you know, to be honest, like, there should be certain regulations on them. And to be honest, they should be a public service. They shouldn't be privately owned. I mean, that's just a fact, because once you're a privately owned company, certain companies have certain agendas, which is not transparent, and they're not neutral.
Yes.
And that's stupid, right? Even, unfortunately, media networks on television are like that these days. So who do you listen to? You don't listen to any of them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. I mean, you need to be completely sovereign for your own mind, I think. Yeah, you don't have to listen to any of it. I mean,
well, you and I don't. It's all garbage.
And they are. Most of them are, if not all.
It's garbage.
It's
a waste of time too. Yeah. Like, see, the thing is that the reason why you and I can talk about a lot of the stuff that we do, because this is our life.
Yes.
You know, why do you know about that book? I read the book. Why? How do you know so much about Eastern spirituality? This is what I do every day. It's not like a pastime.
Yes.
It's what I do every day. I don't care about what the political situation is in America. I have no care. Like,
yes, it comes to almost 2 decades of concentrating on one subject matter, which is spirituality and Eastern philosophy,
of course,
right?
Yeah, 100%.
How you consume the knowledge is just different, but the subject matter itself, it's been same for a very long time for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen after this podcast? We're going to probably go for a long walk, probably have a tea somewhere. And what are we going to talk about?
Continue to go.
Oh, man. We wouldn't be good friends, I can tell you. Some people would be like, oh, man, do these guys ever talk about anything else? Jesus.
Yeah.
But that's our life, you know what I mean? And that's what we find joyful, and other people find other things joyful. Other people like flying kites, and that's great.
Yeah.
You know, if you like flying kites, be the best damn kite flyer you've ever been.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And don't distract your attention with frivolous stuff. And that's the problem in the world. It's just we're distracting ourselves with all this information. We're trying to consume information. And I remember Eric Schmidt said, and Eric Schmidt, he's at Google, he said that, this was a while back, this is actually, and this probably tripled, quadrupled by this time, but it was about 2012 when he said that we are consuming something like so much. I can't remember the figure exactly, but it's a lot more information in one day.
Yeah, like 20 years of information we take in a day,
Yeah.
compared to like early 1900s or
Early,
something
yep,
like
yep.
that. Yeah.
So it's very inorganic. It's not natural. And so once you do that, and then you look on the social media landscape and you wonder why people believe in these mind pathogens and they act a certain way, they're aggressive, as you were mentioning before, it's because it's not natural.
Yeah.
Their mind is riddled with like this bug, like it's a real virus,
Yes.
and they can't think clearly.
And when they really look at their eyes, it looks like they're kind of, I don't know, hooked on something.
Yeah.
Like hypnotized.
Hypnotized, yeah.
Yes, there's something not right.
There's
Yeah.
something not right. There's something in there that's not right. And it's all that information, right? Like it's all, and then, you know, the funny thing is then when you speak about something with that sort of individual, they think they know something from watching a little teaspoon, consuming a teaspoon of information. And then you're in a whole different game, right? Like and that's why I also talk about in Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age about the death of the expert. Because of that, right? There is the death of the expert because people don't even listen to the expert anymore. So,
yeah, because soundbite little clips are much more popular
Yeah.
in the same subject matter.
Yeah.
But they're not even expert, nowhere near it.
No,
but
nowhere
they
near it,
just
yeah.
make it more interesting and soundbitey,
Yeah.
and people just watch
and
that.
they don't listen. They don't listen to the expert.
Yeah.
They're just like, what would he know? I watched this on a 5-minute YouTube video. It's like, but that individual has spent decades cultivating, and you know, and I've had that personally, right, with teaching Eastern philosophy. So
Yeah.
where people will say, but I watched this in a 5-minute thing. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what to say to that. So, so
Yeah.
I guess in the end of the day, guys, our plea is that, you know, expand your attention, embrace meditation. In embracing meditation, you'll expand your attention and stay away from short forms of media.
Yeah. Train to have a focused attention.
Yeah. And the more you train to have focused attention, the more empathy, the more compassion, and the more forgiveness, the more humility
Exactly.
you will begin to exude
Yes.
and influence the world in a positive direction. So guys, thank you for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.